Okay, great. Welcome all to the Williston Development Review Board for March 23, 2021. Next, the annual growth management. I'm going to start with the remote public meeting notice. I, Pete Kelly, as chair of the Williston Development Review Board, find that this public body is authorized to meet electronically without a physical location due to the state of emergency declared by Governor Scott in Act 92 as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. In accordance with the temporary amendments to the open meeting law, I confirm that, number one, public access is available by video conference and telephone through Zoom. All members of the board and the public can communicate in real time during the meeting through Zoom. Planning staff will provide Zoom instructions for public participation before the hearings are opened. Number two, the publicly noticed agenda, including Zoom web address and phone number. Agendas, materials, and Zoom instructions are also provided on the town website, www.town.williston.vt.us. Click on Public Records and Documents, then Agendas and Minutes. Number three, the public can alert us if a problem occurs during the meeting. If anyone has a problem with access, please use the raised hand feature or chat box on Zoom or call Emily at 802-878-6704, extension 3, and leave a message. Number four, continuing the meeting if necessary. If Zoom crashes or the public is unable to access this meeting, it will be continued to April 13th, 2021. All votes taken in this meeting that are not unanimous will be done by roll call in accordance with the law. Let's start the meeting by taking a roll call attendance of all DRB members participating in the meeting. Paul Christensen. John Hemmelgarn is also absent. Steve Lembrecht.
Present.
Pete, John is on.
But he's not participating as a DRB member.
Got it. Yes. Yeah. Sorry.
Scott Riley.
Here. No, I can't get the damn.
Dave Saladino.
Here.
Dave Turner.
Here.
And I'm Pete Kelly, chair. I am also present. At this point, we're going to have a Zoom overview by staff. Is that you, Emily?
Yep, that's me.
Okay.
So welcome. Looks like we have some new folks tonight. We ask that you keep your microphone on mute when you're not speaking to reduce background noise. The use of webcam is optional. If you hear an echo when you're talking, lower your speaker volume. Could be getting some feedback. Please use the chat box for Zoom technical questions only. The chat does become part of a public record. If you would like to provide testimony during the public hearing, press the raise hand button on your toolbar or comment in the chat saying, hey, I'd like to speak. And we will add you to the list and make sure you provide your testimony. If anyone calls in on telephone, they can press *6 to mute or unmute or *9 to raise hand. We'll use a lot of screen share tonight. You should see a green toolbar at the top of your screen. Click View Options, and the side-by-side option will allow you to see the gallery view of all the videos and the screen share to whatever size preference is best for you. If you're starting to get bad internet connection, you can try turning off your video, closing other internet tabs or programs or phone apps. You can also join by telephone for speaker or microphone. There's an up arrow next to the microphone symbol where you can leave your computer audio and join your telephone to the computer. If you have any questions, comment in the chat. Bonnie or I will be able to help you. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Emily. So tonight's agenda, we're going to start with a public forum. Then we're going to go into a growth management overview from the staff. It's a staff report. Then we're going to do individual hearings for each project that's going to be discussed tonight. Then the DRB will go into closed deliberations. We will finalize our scoring and the allocation schedule. Then we'll come back and return in a public forum to have meeting motions and votes. And then we'll conclude tonight with a discussion and vote on approval of the March 9, 2021 meeting minutes. Projects eligible for allocation in 2021 is DP 20-18, the Catamount Golf Housing Project at 1400 Mountain View Road. That's in the RZD district, and the number of units of allocation requested is 131. Also in that same RZD is DP 21-03, the Micho development at 260 Mountain View Road. They have requested 19 units of allocation. And projects outside of the sewer service area is DP 21-08, the Barlin Lot 2 subdivision, and that's in the ARZD. And they are requesting 1 unit of allocation. So that's the sequence that when we get to each project, that's the sequence that we will follow. We'll start with Catamount, then we'll go to Micho, then we'll go to Barlin. At this point, I would like to open it up to the public for anyone who would like to speak on a topic not on the agenda tonight. And so if you've got something to say about the specific projects that are going to be discussed, please don't speak now. But if you have something you would like to raise that is not on the agenda, now is the time.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, John?
Yeah, I'd like to I don't have a raise hand button, I think, because I know too much. But I just wanted to say that, as you know, I'm an appointed member of this board. I'm also an abutting landowner to the property being discussed in DP 20-18 Catamount Golf. For that reason, I would have to recuse myself tonight for that hearing, as well as for the other project outside the growth center, but inside the sewer service area, which is DP 21-05. Therefore, I will not be attending the meeting tonight as a board member. And I just want to let you know that any participation by me tonight will be as a member of the general public.
Thank you, John. I appreciate that. I was aware of that, but it's very good for everyone on this call to know that. So I thank you very much for that declaration. Is there anyone else in the audience that has anything to say?
Just a quick correction. The address for 2105 is 230 Mountain View Road. It's a typo on the agenda that says 260, but it is 230 Mountain View Road.
Thank you. Okay. Next up on the agenda is a growth management overview from staff. Who is doing that, Matt? Okay, take it away, Matt.
All right, and as I get started, Emily's going to screen share the staff report. The DRB chair, Pete, covered most of what's in the 2-column table at the top of this report, summarizing the growth management process for this evening and naming the projects that are under consideration. So I want to begin by just talking a little bit about growth management in general. Growth management is a middle step in the subdivision review process in Williston. It happens between the pre-application step and the discretionary permit step. And projects that have made it through the pre-application review in the calendar year must return and request growth management allocation from a limited number of dwelling unit equivalents that are available to build going forward in the future in Williston, and must receive that allocation before they can proceed to the discretionary permit step. There are two exceptions to the requirement for allocation. There is an inherent right to build one dwelling unit on one undeveloped parcel if that parcel was created before 1990. And also there is an exception written into the bylaw for a project that scores more than 70 points under the growth management criteria, including scoring full points in the energy conservation category for its allocation area. So tonight we are reviewing 3 projects that are at that middle step in the process. And you can see there the bulleted list in the staff report. There are a number of reasons that the town does this type of review, primarily to moderate the pace of growth such that the town can be concurrent with the services it provides to that growth as it comes online, and also to incentivize what are seen as some of the positive attributes that new development can provide to the town. So moving on from there, as I mentioned, this is one of a couple of steps in the process. This is a little different in that this step is reviewing projects really only under the criteria established in Chapter 11 of the bylaw. So in the pre-application review, it's a concept level review by the DRB, and the DRB is striving to notify the applicant and the public of any and all requirements that may apply to the project in the entire zoning bylaw, and looking for any, fatal flaws, things that the applicant might need to address before moving forward at all. And then ultimately the vote is to authorize the project to move forward to growth management, where we have this much more narrowly focused review under the Chapter 11 criteria. Many of the criteria in Chapter 11 are about things that are incentivized by growth management, but not outright required of all developments. Representations that applicants make at growth management about meeting those criteria at various levels are binding on those projects when they move forward to growth management. So if an applicant identifies a particular mixture of housing types or amount of affordable housing or amount of bicycle pedestrian facility, those representations are binding on them when they go forward to discretionary permit and become part of what's required of the project at that stage. If a project were to change so substantially as to undo something that was promised at growth management, the project would have to return through the review cycle, pre-application and growth management again, and be reviewed under the criteria in its new configuration. One peculiarity of growth management is that we use for units and for calculating allowed density on projects, the dwelling unit equivalent. This is a metric that finds a house of 2 bedrooms or greater, or an apartment of 2 bedrooms or greater, as one dwelling unit equivalent, and counts a studio or 1 bedroom unit as 1/2 of a dwelling unit equivalent. So applicants, as they do tonight, can propose a mixture of housing types, and those smaller units that are a studio or 1 bedroom count as 1/2 a unit, both for density and for the amount of allocation they need in order to be constructed. So on to the review process. Growth management is a competitive process. That's why there are scores involved. There is a limited amount of allocation in the form of dwelling unit equivalents identified for each of the 10 years extending out from the coming fiscal year. And it's a limited supply, so the process is competitive. Everybody who went through pre-app comes in, they make their representations, and the purpose of tonight's hearing is for the DRB to discuss and deliberate on potential scores for the projects, and then make an allocation to each project based on its score. We do also have a 30-point minimum score requirement in Chapter 11 with some minor exemptions. This year, we do not have any projects that are recommended to score below 30 points, and therefore that exemption discussion will likely not need to take place. We do have a large allocation schedule that shows what allocation looks like across all of the different growth management areas. You can show that for the moment. So what you see here is 10 fiscal years. Each cell in this table is one dwelling unit equivalent. Cells that are grayed out or shaded in dark gray are cells that are not available to assign allocation to at this time, because the allocation rules include some provisions that hold back certain amounts of allocation for future years. The cells that are white are available if they don't already have a name in them in black, and you can see the black names there for the Northridge project in the sewer service area outside of the growth center. And based on the staff's draft scores tonight, you have a recommended allocation schedule for the projects before the board tonight, and those are identified in the table in red. There's also a provision that I'll mention just while we're there, allowing only 75% of any of the available allocation to be given to any one project. So there's an intent in the bylaw here to make a little space for more than one applicant at a time. And so you can see that sort of play out in the balance in this draft allocation schedule. And we'll come back to this later in the evening. So I think on the main staff report, we can move on to the summary table. As Pete mentioned in his introduction, DP 2018 Catamount Golf for its full build out needs 131 dwelling unit equivalents. DP 2105 Michaud needs 19 dwelling unit equivalents, and DP 2108 Barland needs 1 dwelling unit equivalent. So within that, we have a summary here of the proposed scores. This is the staff proposed score. It's not final. This is what we're here to talk about tonight. And we can go over that, but Catamount Golf with a score of 67, Michaud with a score of 35, Barland with a score of 33. So again, under the staff recommendations, none of these projects score below 30 points. None of them would need to attempt any sort of exemption from the allocation rules. So within the allocation, the other thing you might have noticed in that great big table, and you can see in this summary, is that there are certain amounts of allocation that are set aside only for units that are identified as perpetually affordable at one of the levels incentivized under the bylaw. And both Michaud and Catamount Golf are proposing that some component of their project be perpetually affordable. What this table shows is the breakdown of dwelling unit equivalents that would be set aside as affordable versus those that could be sold at the market rate. So in Catamount, 13 dwelling unit equivalents proposed for allocation in the affordable category and 47 in the market. For Michaud, 15 dwelling unit equivalents in the market rate column and 4 in the affordable column, for a total of 19 dwelling unit equivalents. And in Barland, no affordable, 1 market, for a total of 1. What remains in the draft staff report? Yes.
Matt, if I could interject. Emily, could you go back to the previous page, please? So, okay, go down a little bit more to the proposed. Yeah, right there. Thank you. Okay, so Matt, people that are not familiar with this would probably have the question about Catamount's unfulfilled request, and what does that mean? Could you share with the audience how that works in out years, please?
Yes. So Catamount, under the allocation rules, even at a maximum proposed allocation, cannot receive all 131 unit equivalents it needs to build the full project in one round of growth management. Projects that cannot achieve all of their allocation in one growth management round do need to return for subsequent growth management hearings in future years in order to attempt to receive the remainder of their allocation. However, the project can proceed with a discretionary permit review that would identify the whole project, but probably a phase that could be built with the first round of allocation. This happens commonly in Williston. It happened with the Creek's Edge project on North Williston Road. And it certainly has happened in the Growth Center with our large projects, Finney Crossing and Cottonwood Crossing. You get a project design. There's a certain amount of the residential build out that can happen under what's been allocated. And when the time is right, the applicant comes back under a new pre-application in order to reserve their spot in growth management and then goes through growth management. The caveat there is it's a competitive process. There is no credit given for having achieved some of your allocation in a past year. So when these projects that receive partial allocation, as Catamount Golf is proposed to receive return, they could be in competition with some other projects, and there could be a points race there out in the future.
Great. Thank you, Matt.
Yep.
Okay. Does that conclude your staff report?
Yeah, I'll just mention the last page of the report is a set of draft motions. The way we've been doing this the last few years is to have a motion for each of the 3 allocation areas, approving the slate of adopted allocation, and noting that this year we have no new projects proposed in the Growth Center, so there's only 2 motions there.
Okay. Before we get started, Matt, who from staff are doing the 3 different reports?
So between Emily and I will handle those. Emily will take the lead, and I'll be the sort of the fallback if there's a clarification that she wants to turf over to me.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, first up, DP 20-18, the Catamount project. Who is representing that project? If you would identify yourself and provide your address for the record, please.
Sure. Ken Beliveau, 683 Maple Street, Waterbury Center, Vermont, 05677. I'm here representing Ethan Allen Holdings, who is the applicant for the proposed Catamount Golf subdivision.
Are you the sole representative, Ken?
Well, Chris Senesac, who is the applicant, is here, and in the event that there's a question that comes up that he is better to answer than me, Chris would speak to it.
Okay, Chris, why don't you provide your address for the record at this point, and so we get that formality out of the way. Okay, we might have a mute button.
Yeah, Chris Senesac, 86 Ethan Allen Drive, South Burlington, Vermont.
Great, thank you, Chris. Good recovery. Okay, Emily, you're up.
This is a request for 132 units of allocation for a 148 unit residential subdivision on a 30-acre parcel located at 1400 Mountain View Road in the residential zoning district. The applicant proposes 116 units with 2 or more bedrooms and 32 units with 1 bedroom. A reminder, the dwelling unit equivalent, one dwelling unit equivalent is 2 or more bedrooms, and then a half is a 1 bedroom or a studio. That's why 148 units equals 132 dwelling unit equivalents. We reviewed the applicant's questionnaire, which I can share in this document as needed. In the conserve energy category, we're proposing a score of 0 points. They're not providing any energy efficiency levels based on that criteria. For affordable housing, we're proposing a score of 12 points. Offer housing choices, a score of 16 points. In neighborhood space and build paths and trails, we're proposing the full points 10 out of 10. Design for context, full points 5 out of 5. Build close to services, 0 points. Like affordable housing and conserve energy, build close to services is a numeric calculation where it's based on a distance. So it's a quantity. They're scoring 0 points there. Neighborhood design, we're proposing 4 out of 5 points. They're not eligible for any of the bonus points because they're not providing any additionally conserved open space. And lastly, the new category, sustainable transportation, they're proposing, this is also a quantitative calculation based on the number of options they provide. We're proposing a full 10 out of 10 points. That comes to a total of 67 points. This is the first time the project is coming to the DRB for allocation. In the staff report, I talk about providing one more DUE for a total of 27 DUEs to achieve that 12-point category. Matt and I had some back and forth with the applicant to make sure all the numbers were adding up correctly. The applicant revised their questionnaire, so they are showing 27 DUE to be built as affordable. Given the rules that Matt explained that limit how much allocation can be given to any one project, maximizing that out, this project can get 60 DUE this year, and they would need to return to growth management in subsequent years for the remaining 78. Here's a summary of the allocation schedule. What I've attached to this staff report is an addendum walking through the density calculation and the affordable housing calculation. There's 2 elements at play here. To be eligible for the higher density at 5 dwelling unit equivalents per acre, 30% of the units need to be affordable. And that's based on actual dwellings, not dwelling unit equivalents. So 148 times 30% is 45 dwellings. So even though 27 DUE must be provided to score 12 points, those 27 DUE need to be built as 45 dwellings. This isn't something that needs to be worried about for the growth management approval process, but when the applicant moves forward to discretionary permit, both the growth management score and the density bonus will need to be upheld in their proposal. Basically means some number of their units, affordable units, will need to be the 1-bedroom units. Let me know if you have questions. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Emily. Okay, next up is board questions. DRB members, any questions?
Oh, Dave, you're muted.
No comment, but just on the staff report, it stated 131 instead of 132. It doesn't make a big difference, but just wanted to bring that up.
Yes, that's that inherent right to build 1 dwelling unit.
Oh, sorry.
So they're building 132 DUEs. They only need 131 of allocation.
Good.
Anyone else from the DRB? I mean, this project is from a growth management perspective, it's way above the 30 threshold. So I don't think a lot of debate is warranted on individual scoring. Mr. Beliveau, do you disagree with that statement?
Well, first of all, Pete, we would like to thank the work of the staff. We spent a lot of time going back and forth with the staff. Emily has alluded to that, but a lot of other conversations previous to that in trying to make sure that we're fully in compliance with the town's rules. And our intention all along was to try to score as high as possible in growth management. And obviously we want to be able to get as much allocation as possible, but also it speaks to the intent of this project, which is to try to incorporate as many of the things that are incentivized that the town is looking for, which is why there are incentives into this project to really make it a really well-rounded project that tries to accomplish the goals that the town is trying to accomplish. So that's all of those things are inherent in the project and I think reflected in the score. We would have liked
989-567.
That was not me. We would have liked to have scored higher. We would have liked to have gotten all the points, quite frankly. And Emily's alluded to, there's a couple of dimensions in growth management, which are, they're cut and dried, they're black and white. Obviously close to services, we don't meet that criteria. We don't get any points. We have no disagreement on that. We would have loved to have been able to build an energy efficiency project that met the town's incentives, but it's just, quite frankly, it's cost prohibitive. And, there was an intention at one point to try to score the 70 points and get what's called, I guess, the high flyer status, but it's just not economically viable, especially when you include affordable housing units. Those are just a couple of comments. We do, there are a couple of things that we would disagree with the staff's proposed scoring on, just a couple of items that I would like to address if I could, Pete.
Absolutely.
Sure. So the main one has to do with, it would be 11.8.3, which is to offer housing choice. So in our submittal, we made a number of brief statements in there to describe, to address the issue of offering housing choice. And, some of it is just describing the number of units by dwelling, structure type, et cetera. And this was really a big goal on the part of, Chris and his brother, was really to build a project that had a lot of diversity. And really felt like, here's a project that's got virtually every different housing type that you could possibly offer in this zoning district. And, in the last sentence that I wrote at the bottom of that box, we feel that it offers the greatest range of housing diversity that's ever been proposed in this growth management area or in this zoning district. So, our thought was that this project, it warrants a score of 20 points, not 16 points. And the way I would put it is that, 16 points might seem like a lot of points, but when you convert that to a percentage, it's 80%. And, where I went to school, 80% got you a B minus. It's okay, but it's nothing to write home about. And we really feel like our project on this dimension deserves to get a score of an A. So we would advocate for ourselves in that area, and hopefully the board would see it in that way as well. I have one more that I would like to address, if that's okay, Pete. I was just waiting to see for your prompt.
Oh, no, you have the floor. Please continue.
Okay, thank you. So the other one would be on, this would be for section 11.8.8, and this is neighborhood design. And so the staff has proposed a score of 4. And there's two different ways to score in this category, if I understand it correctly. One is the first one, which is scored 0 to 5, and then it's possible to score between 1 to 5 additional points, which is that middle row in that little matrix that Emily's pulled up on the screen. It says, depending upon the extent and quality of the open space resource to be protected. So here would be my comments on this. So unlike a lot of properties in Williston, are chock full of all kinds of development constraints. They may have steep slopes, they may have wetlands, they may have all kinds of things which are required to be protected under the town's bylaw or under state regulations as well. And what the bylaw says, and what the bylaw wants you to do is to protect those, obviously, as much as possible, and to try to integrate those things into the design of your project. Well, we have a property that doesn't have a lot of constraints. So the range of things that we're going to be able to do relative to that, well, it's limited. Now, Emily made a statement earlier about not adding additional open space. So a couple of comments that I would offer on that is, number one, unlike in the ARZD, there is no mathematical open space requirement to be protected in this zoning district. If there are wetlands and wetland buffers and there are certain things that under statute have to be protected, and those have to be included in the open space area. So, but we don't really have that as far as we know at this point. There could be wetlands are discovered later on when we do permitting, but we don't think so at this point. However, when this project went through pre-application, one of the recommendations of the DRB was for the applicant to add an open space area along the southerly side of the property that would border up against, I believe that's Raven Circle, I believe is the name of the street. So we have included that in the site plan that we have shown. So there's that additional open space area, as well as some additional open space that would run along the westerly side of the property. That would be the side of the property that abuts the former right-of-way for the circumferential highway. So I guess if we're doing the things the board wants us to do, we feel that should be reflected in the score. And maybe that's only a score of 1 more point or 2 more points, but we would just like to score as high as we could. And even if it doesn't affect the allocation decision, it does have meaning for the project. It has meaning for the applicant, and it certainly has meaning for me as the person that filled out the application. So we would ask for some consideration on that dimension as well.
Okay, thank you, Ken.
Otherwise, those are my additional comments. Emily did mention that we had amended one of the pages in our growth management submittal. When you read through the instructions for how you do those calculations on affordable housing, it's a little tricky, and we were off. It was an error in terms of our calculations. We fully intended to pledge enough units to get that scoring of 12 points on this particular criteria. That was the intention all along, and there were some other things in filling out the application. We also needed some guidance from staff, but this is one where we didn't get it completely right when we submitted it.
Pete, can I ask a question?
Absolutely, Scott.
Ken, just which open space to the south are you referring to? Someone draw. Emily, can you draw a circle around what Ken is referring to?
Yeah, on this map, north is to the left.
Right.
So this open space between the houses on Raven Circle and the proposed single-family lots. And then the top of the page behind the yellow and orange houses, that's the open space along the Cirque right-of-way.
Okay, all right.
So Scott, it's that band of open space. It would be to the left-hand side there, which is the southerly portion of the site. And that was in the recommendations from pre-application.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you couple that with my other comments earlier, you know, the intention all along was to fully comply with all of the town's regulations and really to try to reach into the incentives and just do it the way the town wants it to be done. And so we've incorporated that into the submittal, and that's the part we were talking about.
Got it. Okay. Yep, I see it. Thank you.
Okay, any other follow-up questions from the DRB at this point? Okay, next we're going to open it up for public comment. Before we do that, I'm going to put Matt on the hot seat here. Matt, if you could just give a 1 or 2 minute overview of the distinction of what we are here to accomplish today, what public input would be afforded the public at the next stage of the development cycle at the discretionary permit phase. And because I'd like to draw a distinction of really why we're here tonight, what is appropriate for tonight's conversation, and lower the heartbeat of some of the public, and make sure that you realize that you'll have an opportunity to weigh in at the next stage. And this is by no means to stifle conversation. It's just to have an open dialogue of why we're here tonight and what will be forthcoming in the future.
Sure, Pete, happy to do that. So as I mentioned in the introductory staff report, this is a middle step between sketch plan or pre-application, as we call it in our bylaw, and discretionary permit, which is really the much more full-fledged review with completely designed plans and other components like traffic studies, thinking about stormwater design, any number of other attributes of the project. So growth management is special. It's a thing that only happens in Williston and in every other community in Vermont that I'm aware of. You go to some form of a pre-application for a subdivision, and then you proceed immediately to a stage of review that looks like our discretionary permit. And that means that when a project goes through pre-application review, the staff is giving it a preliminary review for the DRB under all of the various requirements of the entire 46 chapter, 318 page zoning bylaw, as opposed to just the one chapter that we're really focused on tonight. And when the DRB gives applicants recommendations coming out of the pre-application process, those recommendations can come from anywhere within that very large document. So there's a set of recommendations the board made for this project and for the others in front of it tonight. And there's not a requirement that the applicant necessarily address those recommendations for the purposes of going through the growth management hearing. It's a reminder and a placeholder that those are matters that will come up and will need to be addressed at that more fully fledged review if the project makes it through growth management. And, you know, part of the intent of the town doing it this way is because allocation and the ability to build houses in Williston is an artificially limited supply, it's possible that somebody in a busy year can come looking for allocation from the town following pre-application and not receive any. So there's an intent here not to require full engineering of somebody who doesn't even know if they can build any houses yet. And so Tonight, as you just heard, as we talked about the individual point scores of this particular project, what the DRB is trying to do as a board with applicant, staff, and public input is establish those scores, total them up, and then determine a phasing schedule that they believe is based on that score. As staff, we've provided numerical score recommendations in every category. We've provided a total of those. We've provided a proposed phasing schedule, but it's for the DRB to consider that just as any other piece of input, consider public input around those individual and total scores and around the schedule, and make their decision from there. So testimony tonight that illuminates aspects of the project or calls out challenges with projects that are specific to the way these criteria are met by projects are going to be especially helpful for the DRB. There may be other things that folks want to talk about tonight where the response from the chair might be, we'll get to that at discretionary permit because that's when that will be reviewed. So Pete, have I done what you'd like me to do, or is there anything you'd like me to add?
That was great. Thank you, Matt. And I just wanted to have you provide that refresher for everybody and make sure that that we really are interested in comments. It's just that some may be appropriate at the next phase. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Emily to manage the public comment phase and the raising of hands and hearing from you.
Yeah. So a reminder, the raise hand button is on the toolbar. It's under the reactions section of the toolbar. You can also comment in the chat. Dave Westman will be up first, followed by Karen Olson. Dave, go on ahead and unmute yourself.
Okay. Thank you, Emily, and thank you, Matt, for the really helpful summary. And I do have a lot of questions. I was involved in some of these meetings in the pre-app stage of this project, and so I understand that probably a lot of my questions would probably be better directed at that discretionary permit stage. So I appreciate Matt's preamble to that. I guess one question that I might have to begin with would be a statement of understanding from the town on how the number of allocated units for this particular cycle was sort of arrived at. I think we're talking about 60 units, if I'm not mistaken, as far as what the staff recommendation was. And, you know, the comment that I would make on this is that it's a very large parcel with a very, if you look at the individual blocks that are being proposed for development, is very dense. And how this project gets staged could make all the difference. I would also note that a 10-year project is an extremely long period of time for neighbors to be dealing with construction noises, traffic, and the rest. And so I guess maybe just a sort of, if Matt, if you wouldn't mind explaining how the town staff came to that sort of recommendation for that number of allocated units, and then I'll probably have some follow-up.
Pete, would you like me to answer that piece real quick?
Yes, please.
Sure. So the staff's recommended allocation schedule on the big table that I bet Emily's bringing up, under the 75% rule and only using the cells that are available, meaning colored white on this, the staff's recommended phasing schedule represents the maximum amount of units that could be allocated to this project, just as a mathematical reality. This is the highest scoring project in the RZD in the history of growth management, as far as I can tell, under the staff's proposed score. It does hit a lot of the various incentivized elements in Chapter 11. So staff did not see any reason to lower the amount of recommended allocation for this project below what could feasibly be done under the allocation rules. I would note that this shows 10 fiscal years. The growth management chapter does now allow a developer, if they wish, to develop at a faster pace than this schedule once they get started. The reality of the old system was that we found applicants typically waited a couple of years into their phasing cycle to do anything because they didn't have enough units they could build. Then they would start, then they would build on schedule going out from that. This takes that essential unevenness of the system under the current rules and moves it forward. So the rules state that once an applicant builds their first unit, they can build any units for which they have allocation in sequence to the end of whatever they've had allocated. So a large project like this might end up taking 10 years all on its own, but it won't necessarily take 10 years for this amount of allocation to be built because of the town's rules. In fact, the town's rules would allow it to build out a little quicker.
Dave,
Thanks, Matt.
a follow-up question.
I do, yeah. I mean, so thanks. I understand a lot of the sort of scoring. I mean, I guess one thing I want to just put some perspective on is you mentioned that this is one of the highest scoring projects in the RZD, and I don't know. I look at this project and it doesn't look residential to me. It looks more urban, than growing up in Milwaukee where I lived. I mean, this is far more urban than an urban area. So I guess to me, like I don't know if that's even an opportunity to criteria, but I guess I would sort of point to the design scoring that the town did, and it just kind of looking at the density. This street, whatever road this main street would look like, and all of the sort of the I guess you would either call those secondary or tertiary roads. I mean, that looks like a level of density that exceeds what Zephyr Road is in the development zone. And to me, that is very much out of context to the rest of this neighborhood. And that, it seems out of place, both on this, if this was a smaller unit with a densely proposed development, okay, but this is a very large parcel with a very dense application. And so I can understand how mathematically it might be checking all of these boxes that Chapter 11 has established, but fundamentally it seems out of place with the nature and context of the surrounding area. I mean, it really looks like this is a, development zone project in the middle of the residential zone. And so I'm wondering if the scoring on that design criteria might be too high. That's right. Thank you, Emily. That's the design for context. So I don't know if staff wants to respond to that, or if they just want to, if the board wants to sort of consider that for, in the final awarding of these points or allocation of units. I do have a couple other comments on the scoring. The trails scoring in specifically. I've also been involved in the town's sustainable transportation committee, and we're in the process of developing a map. And while I certainly like to see connected trails, I think that this project would benefit greatly from some collaboration with neighbors, both in the Williston, in the Brennan Woods neighborhood to the west, which is where I am located, but also in that Coyote Lane. I believe that the multi-use path is intended to connect with the other town pathway there. It's not totally clear to me, but you've basically got there you go. So it looks like that multi-use path ends at Raven Circle, and yet you have a perfectly good pathway through Coyote Lane. And I recognize that may not be part of this parcel, and so they can't propose any development there. But it just seems a little bit, is there something to do there? Is there something that can be done there? Because that trail, the multi-use path ending at Raven Circle, is just kind of like it's dumping you off into the middle of the street. I mean, is that really a connection? If you would then, to actually connect to the Coyote Lane, you would have to cut through people's property, which is not allowed, or at least not encouraged. So I would just question the scoring of a 10 on that, quite honestly, because it's really not connecting to anything. I would also point to the Brennan Woods connector. That connector is going into, nowhere. That's going into a theoretical right of way that may or may not be open to the town. I certainly personally hope it would be at some point. It's not today. So again, you've got a path to nowhere, basically going into people's backyards in Brennan Woods. So that to me doesn't really seem like it's connecting to anything. And then the path that goes all the way to Mountain View Road also connects to nothing. And so as I understand it, the scoring is based on connectivity and length of that path. So really all this project does is have exceptionally long paths that don't go anywhere. And so they wouldn't actually be used by anyone. So I would suggest that that trail scoring is also artificially high. I don't think that they should get something for the trails, but I don't think it's a 10 because they don't go anywhere. Maybe in the future they would. Maybe if this project wanted to help the town make some connections, pay for some of those connections as a result of this project, then maybe it should deserve that. But I certainly don't see anything in this plan that would address it. And then one more context point on the scoring. I understand they got they scored the full points for the sustainable transportation, and I was a little bit unclear as to why. I know they have a parking lot and an EV charging station, but I'm not entirely clear where else they would actually score for that. I'm sorry, thank you, Emily. So we're looking at, maybe could you explain this scoring a little bit better so that I can understand it?
Sure. So this score, and I'll go to page 2. It's the more categories you provide, the more points you get. There's 5 options. Transit use, like a shelter, carpooling, EV charge, car sharing, and secure covered bike storage. The number of each of those is based on how many residential units there are. So based on 25 dwelling unit equivalents. So the more categories you provide, the more points you get. The number you have to provide in each of those categories is based on the total number of residential units.
Okay, so the scoring is based on the number of residential units that have carports?
So, for example, a 25 dwelling unit equivalent project would only have to provide 1 transit shelter, 1 carpool space, 1 EV spot, 1 car share space, and 2 covered bicycle storage spaces. So that small project could get a full points because they're providing one of the 5, one of each of those subcategories. Because this is a bigger project, it's it's based on per 25 dwelling unit equivalents. So that's why they need to give 6 shelters, 6 carpooling spaces.
So that's a quantification of the number of transit carpool spots, EV.
Yeah.
So they're going to have 6 EV charging chargers on the premise. Is that what that is saying?
Correct. There would be 6 EV charges, and they would be, based on the definition of this bylaw, available for the public to use and the residents to use. Looking on their site plan, most of those facilities are going to be combined. This is a sketch plan, so they're not showing it on the site plan quite yet, but they're committing to it in their questionnaire of the EV, the car share, the bike storage, and at discretionary permit, how those are specifically laid out will be determined. But right now they're just saying they're going to provide these numbers.
Okay, thank you. That is helpful, because when I was looking at these numbers, that was not what I thought I was looking at. I thought I was actually looking at points, and so that's really helpful context. I mean, honestly, like I appreciate the enthusiasm for sustainable transportation. You know, I don't quite understand how you could build 6 transit centers for one development that isn't even on an active bus route. So I guess I would kind of, I don't know, maybe they restored the bus service on Mountain View Road, but as of fall, it wasn't running. So 6 carpooling, I get it. There's a parking lot that seems perfectly reasonable. I've never seen 6 EV charging facilities in one place, like ever. And I work at an energy company that encourages electric vehicle charging. And maybe that's 3 terminals and 2 ports on each side. I'm not quite sure how they're sort of defining that or how the town has defined it. But if that is one terminal with 2 ports on each side, to see 6 of those terminals in one spot of a development zone like this, or a development like this, would be very surprising. It'd be exciting to see, but sort of doubtful to me. So I understand that these are sort of legally binding commitments that the developers that is now making to the board. So it'd be exciting to see all of these show up in the project itself. I was a little bit surprised seeing these numbers. So thank you for explaining that. I'll probably save the rest of my questions for the other phases of the permitting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Emily, who's up next?
Up next is Karen Olson. Karen, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you. I actually have similar concerns to Dave. Specifically, if you were looking at the 11.8.5, the build paths and trails, just like he mentioned, the one that I noticed right away was that path that leads to essentially nowhere, that kind of leads to the what was supposed to be the circ. And my neighborhood, I don't know if I mentioned that, but I also live in Brendan Woods. So that path seemed to invite people to then cross through folks or into people's yards to connect to the Brendan Woods Drive. Possibly, I think that path could be rerouted to be maybe a little bit, I'm not really sure of my directions, but on that map, a little bit more to the left where there's kind of an open space that then can connect to, I'm very directionally challenged, but if you look at to the left of, like, we're very close to where the single family home would be, I think that there's, if you were to zoom up, I think you would see that there's a space that's between, it's off of Brentwood's Drive where there are no homes, that maybe moving that path, if there is a need for that path to connect to neighborhoods, it would have to, to move that path left, I guess. But like Dave was saying, the other end of the path to Mountain View Road, there's not even a sidewalk there. It's a very, and I don't know if the town has plans to build a sidewalk there, but it's a really highly trafficked road and not very pedestrian friendly. So I would definitely like to see that path be better utilized to not maybe go right to Mountain View Road where it's not very pedestrian friendly at the moment. And I agree with him too along the design for context under 11.8.6. So I won't reiterate that, but I agree with what he was saying. I didn't realize you were going to have the same comments, Dave.
Pete, maybe
Yes.
we can get staff to chime in on there's been a couple of questions on the paths. Maybe the staff can chime in on how paths are determined and the idea that you work within the parcel that is at hand, and they don't necessarily, they don't necessarily merge onto other parcels at the time of the development, but that we are putting together a big jigsaw puzzle. So I'm doing what I'm asking the staff to do. So maybe Matt or Emily, you can chime in.
Yeah. Right. So our bylaw incentivizes building sidewalks, building pedestrian and cyclist connectivity. And the opportunity to get those connections are when individual parcels come in to develop. That's one way to go about it. The other way is, buying land, buying easements, buying property rights from people, and going out and financially the town paying to build all these facilities. So in development review, that's when our bylaw says build your segment of sidewalk on your property. That's why throughout the growth center, you'll see as sites develop and redevelop, they just have their portion of sidewalk. And it's as things come through that, like Scott said, you build out that puzzle. Another piece is added to the puzzle. The little stub that showed connecting to the circ right-of-way, it's probably still nebulous and could be decided at discretionary permit if that path is actually going to be built as a sidewalk or if it's just going to be given as an easement. Our intent with creating, on the other side, there's also that substreet is as land comes up for development around this parcel, or if the circ right of way, if anything ever happens to that property, that there's the opportunity to create that connection from this parcel to other parcels, and that it's not hemmed in with its initial design.
Okay, thank you, Emily.
Can I ask a question though? Sorry, follow up to that.
Yeah.
How does the lack of connectivity to the resources affect the scoring? Because I get that you're building a jigsaw. However, there's still a lot of already developed land, and I don't think you're going to convince me that a parcel on Raven Circle is going to come up to connect that multi-use pathway to the like Coyote Lane pathway, right? I mean, it's like that development is kind of spoken for. Those parcels have been developed. So in the scoring itself, connectivity needs to be sort of treated separately from just if you build it, they will connect someday in the future. Because if you don't have some kind of mechanism for connecting them, what you end up with is a bunch of jigsaw puzzles of pathways where we were encouraging those developments, not connecting to anything, because in the past, maybe those developments didn't have the same, trail requirements. So we're enlightened today, but we weren't back then. And so we still don't have real connectivity. I don't know how to solve that problem, but it seems like it should be reflected in the scoring.
Yeah, I think that's where it evolves from the development review side of things to select board policy on finishing out those networks where there's gaps in the system that are in public right of way. That's a select board decision on how to handle that after, public roads have been built, town right of way exists. And that's where the official map, that the project that you're working on, will help with helping the town prioritize and incentivize filling out those desired connections throughout the town's multi-use path system. Matt, I don't know if you have anything else to add.
I think, Emily, just to bring it back to the words of the scoring criteria. So I don't know if you want to bring that up, I've got it in the bylaw.
Yeah.
So see if we can just get that so everybody can see it.
Yeah, I'm pulling it up. I pushed the wrong button. There we go. This criterion favors proposed residential subdivisions that build their portion of the paths and trails called for by the comprehensive plan.
And we do note, in the bullet points, the majority of the proposed dwelling units are served by the town's path and trail system, with the developer building all on-site segments. So this was where the staff did propose 10 points. David Westman brought up the question of, there is a gap down at Coyote. You come out of the existing path system and you're on, I forget if it's called Raven Circle or Coyote there. Sorry, without the map in front of me. You're on the street for a little bit. For the DRB to think about, I would consider that a low traffic street and a fairly safe one, for someone to navigate. But having worked in the bike advocacy world, I can tell you there's a lot of opinions about that sort of thing, and you've got a little bit there as you go toward the bottom of the page. Emily's showing on Raven, where you go just over, and I think you have to go down Coyote a little bit to hook around. I think it'll be off the plan.
Yeah, let me see if I can get the map up.
In order to get there. And then in terms of coming out onto Mountain View Road, it is currently the town's eventual plan for there to be a bike lane added to Mountain View Road as part of a widening project. That was the result of the 2014 scoping project the town and the Regional Planning Commission did. So not a path at this time, currently a planned lane, but there is a plan for an enhanced bicycle facility along Mountain View Road. That project does have potential funding as a circumferential highway alternative project, but it's not currently scheduled or in the state's capital plan. So it's out in the future.
Can I just remind folks that when you're ready to speak, to state your name and your address for the record? Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie.
Or drop your address in the chat too.
Okay, Emily, who's up next?
Ken's up next.
Thank you. I did want to make a comment related to the question that was just asked, these questions about the connectivity. And, Matt has already partially addressed it, but if you were to ride a bike on the town's bike path, and let's say you were to start over there at the Allenbrook School, as I once did once upon a time, with the intent of following the town's bicycle path or multi-use path system to get to, say, the building where Matt is standing right now, which I once did, and you would say, what happened to the bike path? Because it would disappear. And it didn't really disappear, but it appears to disappear because, in fact, the town's bike path goes along whatever the name of that street is through Southbridge. It's just there on the side of the road. So that's something that exists today. And that essentially is, to use a colloquial expression, it's just basically down the street and around the corner from where this proposed project is, through, essentially residential streets, one of which is, I don't know if it's technically a cul-de-sac, but it's a street that doesn't go to anywhere. So a place that I think would generally be considered to be safe for a cyclist or a pedestrian. And as Dave Westman pointed out, there is the existing section of the separate bike facility, which is, I guess, to the east of Coyote Lane, that kind of just basically dead ends nowhere. It's waiting for some other potential project to come along down the road. So, we were cognizant that those facilities were there. And, we want to build a facility that's going to connect, certainly for the people that might live in this area. It would give them an opportunity to be able to, whether it's to walk or ride a bicycle or whatever, to get access to those facilities. So I did want to mention that the existing town's bike path just does go along a road. And so if there were a section of the bike path that went along the side of a residential road, we would not be blazing a new trail. The town would be using a template that it utilized once before. The other comment that I wanted to make about what's really essentially a proposed path that would link to the former Cirque right-of-way. When former Governor Shumlin pulled the plug on the Cirque, whatever number of years ago that was now, that really set up all kinds of conversations at the town level, notably at the Conservation Commission and to some extent at the Planning Commission, about ways in which that right-of-way could be utilized for the town, whether some sort of a linear park or, a pedestrian corridor or something along those lines. So there have been conversations about that. Whether or not it might ever come to fruition, hard to know. But we would, if we were able to build this project out, we would certainly want to be able to provide people to get access to it. And that was really our intention in doing that. And then, lastly, Matt's comment about Mountain View Road. There have been all kinds of conversations in the past, the town level, with the Planning Commission, in particular, about having some sort of enhanced bike and or pedestrian facility along Mountain View Road. It had been hoped at one time that the preferred alternative would be a separate facility and not just a wide lane on the side of the road. When the select board made the decision as part of that scoping study, there was a very strongly worded objection that was made from one of the property owners on Mountain View Road to the east of the property in question. And that was clearly was a deciding factor in the town not going to acquire additional right-of-way. Having said that, I could see where it's very conceivable down the road that there could be a separate path that would be built, say, from this proposed road westward to bring you over to Route 2A, where there is an existing and proposed multi-use path. And certainly a connection to Brennan Woods would not be out of the realm of possibility. So there are some things there that are very likely to come down the road, in my view, at some point in the future. So I just wanted to add those additional comments.
Okay, thank you, Ken.
Thank you.
Emily, who's up next?
Dave, you want to go again?
Yes, thank you. I want to share your enthusiasm for the Mountain View Road project and the Cirque right-of-way project. I will happily advocate alongside you for all of those projects to be completed. I really do hope and truly hope that can come to Williston sooner rather than later. One thing I just wanted to say, on the topic of the Cirque, is that I raised safety comments in the pre-app proposal of this project regarding the presence of the high pressure natural gas pipeline currently in that right of way, and my concerns with the proximity of very heavy earth moving equipment in a pipeline that has now been shown by evidence that was at times located perhaps higher than the stated building permit. What I'm trying to say is that the pipeline may be closer to the ground, at the top of the ground, and subject to safety concerns. That was shown in Heinsberg to be the case, where it was not buried to the proper depth. We have not raised such issues in Williston. I certainly hope that's not the case, but it's all the more important reason to just point out that I raised those safety concerns, and that, at least in part, was why that 50-foot buffer was requested. And I will eventually, concede the point that that's probably a reasonable safety buffer for the pipeline. However, I don't think that accommodation that the board asked for would necessitate any additional points. You made that comment in your initial presentation, and I just wanted to sort of put that out on the record because the circ has come up a couple times. I'd much rather see it as a bike path personally, but that could be a long time coming. And then lastly, on your last comment on Ravens Circle and Coyote are dead end streets. Well, not if this project is built. This project will connect Ravens to Mountain View. We have no idea how the traffic patterns will change when you create another connection to Mountain View. Brennan Woods already gets, let's call them shortcutters going through the neighborhood, trying to bypass the stop sign, or the stoplight rather, at Mountain View and 2A. And how that will change the traffic pattern for Coyote and Raven Circle and the Southridge neighborhood is totally undefined. And so I would say that makes trail connectivity all the more important in that context, is that you're no longer talking about dead end streets. You're talking about through roads that potentially should have double lines on them, given the amount of traffic. I think the amount of traffic going on Brennan Woods probably deserves a double line, especially at the speed, but that's a different point entirely and not for this committee. I just wanted to put that out there since we're still just talking about the scoring of those connected trails. Thank you.
Okay, Emily, who's up next?
Don't have anybody else in the queue. If you would like to provide a comment, type in the chat or press the raise hand button on the reaction section of the toolbar. I'm hearing no more comments.
Okay. DRB members, are there any final comments or questions or concerns that you'd like to raise?
I'm all set.
Okay. Mr. Beliveau, as representing the applicant, any final words?
No, I think, believe it or not, I think I've run out of words for tonight. Tonight, yes, tonight.
Okay.
Quick, shut them off.
Okay. Emily, mute everybody, please. Okay, we're going to close DP 20-18 at 8:26. Thank you all for everybody who participated in a very meaningful discussion. Thank you. Okay, next up is DP 21-05 Michaud. Who is present representing the applicant? And if you would state your name and your address for the record, please, that would be appreciated.
Paul O'Leary with O'Leary Brook Civil Associates, 13 Corporate Drive, Essex Junction, Vermont, 05452. And also with me is Scott Michaud, the property owner.
I think you might be muted, Scott.
Yep. My name is Scott Michaud, 270 Sutton Farm Drive, Shelburne, Vermont, 05482.
Okay, great. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Paul. Emily, an overview, please.
All right. This is a request for 19 units of allocation for a 20-unit residential subdivision on a 10-acre parcel located at 230 Mountain View Road in the residential zoning district. The applicant proposes 20 units with 2 or more bedrooms and no one-bedroom units. The existing dwelling will remain and retains the inherent right to 1 unit of allocation. 20 units minus 1 equals 19 units of allocation requested. For the score, we're proposing an overall score of 35 points. 0 points in the category of conserve energy, 8 in the category of affordable housing, 5 for housing choices, 3 for neighborhood space, 5 for both paths and trails, as well as design for context, 0 for build close to services, 5 for neighborhood design, and 4 for sustainable transportation. This is the first time the DRB may award allocation to this project. We're recommending a full allocation schedule as requested. Even though the density analysis may preclude building of all the proposed units, I'll get to that in a moment. We're recommending a low score of 3 out of the, I think it's a total of 10 points. Yep, 3 out of 10 points for neighborhood space. They're proposing a little community area with a community garden and a gazebo. This could be enhanced to get more points. On density and the dwelling unit calculation, when I was preparing the staff report for this project, it came to my attention that the density might only allow 18 dwelling unit equivalents on this property. They're not seeking the density bonus of 5 dwelling units per acre. They're trying to just do the 3 dwelling units per acre. So at growth management, and this density table shows that calculation. At growth management, they're requesting 20. At discretionary permit, they might not be able to build all 20. What would happen is if the DRB gives them more allocation than they can build at discretionary permit, those additional allocation units will be forfeited, and we would just take them off this table. We're recommending keeping them on there in case the density analysis at discretionary permit does allow for 20 units. The project wouldn't have to return through pre-app and growth management again. And I show the affordability calculation as well as additional information. But again, a total of 35 points, which is above the 30-point minimum. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Emily. Okay, DRB members, any questions?
I did just have the question. It looks like the site plan, was the site plan updated since our last hearing?
Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So it looks like the type of units has changed a little bit, and some of the roadway connectivity, or that little stub road got added.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the stub road got added. That was a pre-app recommendation that they show connectivity to the neighboring parcel. So that is new on the site plan.
Mm-hmm.
What else changed, Paul?
The stub road changed to line up a little bit better with the parcel to our west. We also added a neighborhood area in the center of the parcel where before there was a unit there. We moved the community gardens, which originally were by Mountain View Road and are now located in the center of the parcel along where the picnic shelter is. And basically we respaced and readjusted the units a little bit to fit the new road alignment.
Paul, is there a difference between the brown, or I guess what looks like brown, the brown and the darker brown and lighter brown, or I'm sorry, the brown and yellow maybe?
Yeah.
Are they both duplexes?
Different size units. The yellows are a larger duplex unit. The browns are a more compact, small unit. The yellow ones can actually be a single floor type unit if you desire, whereas the darker brown units would be a townhouse style with a first and a second floor.
Got it. But they're both duplexes, whereas the orange ones or the other ones are single family?
That's correct.
Okay.
They also eliminated the unit that was down in that questionable area of the wetlands.
That's correct.
Okay, any other questions from the DRB? Okay, applicant comments. Paul, you've already added a little something, but do you have anything more to add?
Yes, just a couple quick comments. Emily talked about the density, and she is correct in that point of time, but the density currently is predicated on what is shown for wetlands on the map. We had a preliminary delineation done. It hasn't been approved by the state. We expect to have it redelineated. And once we know exactly what the extent of the wetland is, we will obviously redo the density calculation. And it's possible that we could lose the unit. We might gain a unit too and have to come back for another one. We won't know that until this summer when we complete the wetland analysis work. A couple questions on the scoring. Staff had mentioned that under 11.8.4 provide neighborhood space, that we could score some additional points there by adding some more amenities to the neighborhood space. We would agree that adding a water supply and adding a tool shed would definitely benefit and enhance the use of that space. And we are willing to add both of those items. So hopefully that'll pick us up another point or two under that category. And also under 11.8.9, sustainable transportation. With the neighborhood space, we have enough space there, so we certainly could add a car sharing space or carpooling space and pick up a couple more points under that item. And other than that, I really don't have many other comments.
Okay, thank you. Scott, do you have some comments?
No, I'm all set.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, public comments. Emily, are there any people out there with their hand raised? I think you're muted.
Yep. Raise hand button on the reaction section of the toolbar or comment in the chat. So far, the only questions I've had in the chat have been logistical directly to me about accessing documents.
Okay.
I'm not seeing any comments from the public.
Okay. DRB members, any of that testimony prompt any additional questions? Okay, hearing none. Paul or Scott, any closing comments?
Nothing from me.
No, I'm all set.
Okay. All right. Thank you for coming. We're going to close DP 21-05 at 8:36. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, next up. DP 21-08, Kelly Barlin. First, Emily, with the staff report, please.
All right, one moment. All right, this is a request for 1 unit of allocation for a 2-lot subdivision of a roughly 10.5 acre parcel at Lot 2 Shagbark Lane in the Agricultural Rural Residential Zoning District. Lot 2 retains the inherent right to develop 1 unit, but it has not yet been constructed. The other 2 lots on Shagbark Lane, built under SUB 0605, were constructed using growth management allocation in prior years. It was Lot 2 that retains the inherent right. In the category, we are proposing, the applicant's proposing 0 points for conserve energy and affordable housing. Staff has scored 5 points for build paths and trails. In this part of the town, unlike the residential zoning district, Trail easements are incentivized as opposed to paved paths or sidewalks. Design for context, 8 points, and minimize visual impact, 20 points, for a total of 33 points. This is above the 30-point minimum. We did receive a comment letter from Peter and Allison Judge that was submitted and included in your packets. The concerns in that letter do not relate to the growth management score that will come into play at discretionary permit. Similar with the legal opinion that we discussed back in January, that will not come into play until discretionary permit. So we are recommending 1 unit that's requested. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Emily. Board questions. One thing that I neglected to do was to ask who was represented for the applicant. I see that you're here, Kelly. If you would please state your name and your address for the record, please.
Sure. Kelly Barland, 294 Wildflower Circle in Williston, Vermont.
Thank you. Are you the sole representative tonight?
I am.
Okay, thank you. Okay, DRB members, any questions for staff or the applicant? Okay, Kelly, do you have any comments or concerns or commentary to provide?
Not really. I think Emily did a really good job with outlining it, and I agree with the scoring. So off we go.
Okay. Any wrap-up comments by DRB members? Okay, hearing none. We are going to close DP 21-08, the Parlin application at 8:40. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is the deliberative session. We are going to break away, go into deliberations, and we will be back into a public session at the conclusion of the deliberations. Thank you. Okay, welcome all back to the Williston Development Review Board of March 23, 2021. The board has come out of the deliberative session. It is 9:27 p.m. There's 3 proposed motions in, or at least 3 categories, of which there's 2 motions. WDB 11.7 Growth Center allocation. There were no applications submitted, so we are not going to have a motion for that, for the Growth Center area. Is there a motion for WDB 11.8 Other Sewer Service Area allocation?
Yes, there is. As authorized by Chapter 11 of the Williston Development Bylaw, I, Steve Lambrick, move that the Williston Development Review Board, having reviewed all of the submitted materials, including the recommendations of the town staff, and having heard and duly considered the testimony presented at public hearing of March 23rd, 2021, make the following allocation of dwelling units within the growth target established by Chapter 5 of the Williston Comprehensive Plan within the town's other sewer service area, as shown in Table 2, reference approved score column, and Table 4, established by the Development Review Board on March 23rd, 2021.
Thank you, Steve. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Dave Turner seconds it. Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, we're going to do a roll vote. Paul Christensen, yay or nay?
Aye. Yay.
Steve?
Yay.
Scott Riley?
Yay.
Dave Saladino?
Yay.
Dave Turner?
Yay.
Pete Kelly is a yay. 6 yays. Nobody opposed. Motion carries unanimously. Next up is WDB 11.9 Outside Sewer Service Allocation. Is there a motion?
Yes, I'll make a motion. As authorized by Chapter 11 of the Williston Development Bylaw, I, Scott Riley, move that the Williston Development Review Board, having reviewed all of the submitted materials, including the recommendations of the town staff, and having heard and duly considered the testimony presented at the public hearing of March 23, 2021, make the following allocation of dwelling units within the growth target established by Chapter 5 of the Williston Comprehensive Plan outside of the town sewer service area as shown in Table 2 of the approved score column and Table 4 established by the Development Review Board on March 23, 2021.
Thank you, Scott. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Dave Saladino seconds. Any further discussion? Okay, roll vote. Paul Christensen, yay or nay?
Yay.
Steve?
Yay.
Scott?
Yay.
Dave Saladino?
Yay.
Dave Turner?
Yay.
Pete Kelly is a yay. That's 6 in favor, none opposed. Motion carries. Is there a motion to approve the meeting minutes of March 9th, 2021?
I so move.
Steve moves. Is there a second?
I'll make the second.
Scott, second. Any further discussion? All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 6 in favor, none opposed. Minutes are approved. Is there any other business to bring forth tonight? Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Dave. Is there a second?
Second.
Steve seconds it. Any discussion? All those in favor to adjourn indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Thank you all for your time.